Several new diseases with the genetically engineered crop. One of those is sudden death syndrome. It's a disease that didn't exist before. Growers are seeing that their crops aren't as vigorous as they used to be. But what we've done is try and detoxify it because we didn't know how to get it out of the soil.
We have to prevent patients with cancer, but to do that we got to heal the land. And you're giving us one of the key constituents to what's basically destroyed the land, to use your word, and precipitated disease.
Welcome to Prescribed by Dr. Nathan Goodyear, where integrative oncology meets holistic healing. This podcast is your home for the latest in innovation, exploration, and elevation in all areas of integrative oncology, medicine, health, wellness, and beyond. Join me and a host of other innovators as we go from practicing to prescribing. Your daily dose of wellness begins now.
Dr. Goodyear here for another Prescribed by Dr. Nathan Goodyear podcast. This is a special episode because I'm bringing somebody here that is going to bring wisdom and experience to the conversation of healing the soil and healing the land. And he's going to be able to bring some perspective, and you can see him next to me right now, to this issue of regenerative farming in a way that is going to blow your mind. And it's going to give you some insight to the problem that we're dealing with, but also some solutions of how we can move forward to heal the land through healing the soil and this heal the body. Let me give you his bio. This is Dr. Don M. Huber. He grew up on a farm. I love that. Bachelor's of Science, 1957, and a MS degree, 1959, from the University of Idaho. So he got his master's there. PhD, 1963 at Michigan State University. He was a graduate of the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College and the Industrial College of the Armed Forces. Serial pathologist at the University of Idaho. So you told me a little bit before you created a lot of friends there. He actually said he created an enemy, and he thus moved on. In 1971, Don actually joined the Department of Botany and Plant Pathology at Purdue University, where he currently is a professor emeritus. He is a leading figure in plant pathology, focusing on much of the research on the soil-borne pathogens, microbial ecology, disease, nutrition interactions, cultural and biological controls, and host parasite physiology. He's been a leading voice in the public debate and discourse in the arena of genetically modified or GMOs, herbicides, soil, food, health, particularly glyphosate. I mean, that has been one where you have engaged year after year, decade after decade, because you were instrumental in that original research, or some of the original research associated with that. And I'll let you jump into that in just a moment. Don, thank you for joining me.
Well, Nathan, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
You need to search Don up, and we're going to put his career in the show notes where you can find him and find some of his work. It's rare that you have an opportunity to meet pioneers, meet people that changed industry. You are one such person, pioneer, and you've changed an industry. Your persistence, your work, your drive to speak the truth doesn't receive enough accolades. You won a Lifetime Achievement Award last night. That's not enough. Thank you for your work.
Well, thank you. When you see things changing that aren't the way they ought to be, you have an obligation to speak up and correct those. I've had that opportunity, and I'm still learning. But I appreciate the opportunity to share 45 or 50 years of research.
Wisdom.
In this area.
Wisdom, please, please do.
Excuse me here for a minute. I I was thinking we're over in eastern Idaho a month ago, and on June 5, 1976, the Teton Dam that had just been completed broke. It released 80 billion gallons of water, flooded 400,000 acres of land, $1 billion of damage, injured 1,000 people, but only 11 people lost their lives in that whole episode. The reason that so few casualties was that when people were warned, they warned their neighbor. We find in our society that warning doesn't always come. It's not always listened to. Yeah. But the things when it comes to glyphosate that I share, I hope when you see it as a warning, that you warn your neighbor. It's critical for our continued existence and continued function as a viable agricultural system. Glyphosate was first patented in 1964 as a mineral chelator, patented by Stauffer Chemical Company to clean steam pipes and boilers. It actually chelates, and by chelating, that means it's a chemical that can grab onto another element and change its characteristics.
Kind of like a lock and key.
Right.
Yeah, grabs it.
So that it's not, with glyphosate, when it chelates with those essential minerals, it ties them up so they're no longer physiologically available for function. Now, we use chelators, citric acid, and a lot of our amino acid and organic acid chelators to actually move minerals across the cell membranes and to increase their solubility. With glyphosate, it ties them up so that they're not physiologically available. And therefore, those minerals that we rely on for life are not available for functioning as cofactors for the minerals. But it was first patented then and used as to clean steam pipes and boilers. 10 years after that 1964 patent, Monsanto patented it as a broad-spectrum herbicide, weed killer. In 2002, they also patented glyphosate as an antibiotic. It's a powerful antibiotic, but it's a powerful antibiotic against the beneficial organisms. It stimulates the virulence, makes the pathogens more virulent, more damaging. So the Clostridium, Salmonella, Listeria, all of the E. coli, those pathogens that we're concerned about in our food supply are all stimulated and enhanced by glyphosate because the competition that normally controls them is very sensitive to it. It's a very difficult compound to degrade. It's a synthetic amino acid, so that there aren't a lot of organisms that can break that carbon phosphate bond with this synthetic amino acid so that it can stick around for years. We have situations where we're going in now where it's been used routinely. You can find 20 years of glyphosate accumulated and sitting in the soil, waiting sometime to be desorbed. On some of our normal farming practices, we're doing that in order to provide nutrition for the plants. When we do that, we have an active herbicide, and a grower can do everything right agronomically and kill the crop. We're applying a quarter 250 million pounds of glyphosate just in North America or in the U.S. every year. We're using that's in agriculture, we're using another 250 million pounds in forestry and parks and recreation, on right-of-ways and in home gardens, not recognizing some of the other aspects of that chelation potential and also antibiotic potential in changing the soil microflora have in our food supply. So as I indicated, we're finding high levels of residual glyphosate in many of our areas now, our prime agricultural land. If the glyphosate is desorbed, and phosphorus fertilizers will do that, if they're desorbed, we've lost our production potential. Our soils are sick because of the antibiotic activity against beneficial organisms, but we're seeing very high levels, again, 15, 20, 30 years accumulated glyphosate with almost no degradation. So very toxic soils that both the antibiotic activity and the immobilization of essential nutrients are impacting our ability to produce our crops and the stimulation of disease. So it only takes half an ounce of glyphosate to inhibit the uptake and translocation of manganese, zinc, and iron in the plant. So
half an ounce.
Half an ounce. That's about 11 grams, 12 grams.
Wow.
And that's spread out over an acre ground. So it's a very potent chelator. And when you're looking at the regulatory process in the plant, a very dynamic damage that is done. The consequence of that tie-up of minerals is that nutrient density in our crops is dramatically reduced. So if we look over the last 30 years of at our crops as far as nutrient density for those minerals that we need or that our animals need, we see anywhere from a 25 to a 75% reduction. We have a lot of empty calories, but not a lot of manganese, zinc, iron, and copper, and even some of the macronutrients are also greatly reduced because it's a broad spectrum chelator for any positively charged mineral. Can be very persistent. I had a picture here of a pumpkin field in Georgia that's planted perpendicular to the previous crop's corn, Roundup Ready corn. You can pick out every row of corn from the previous year by the yellow pumpkins because of the tie-up of magnesium and manganese.
Wow.
Two elements involved in are critical for photosynthesis, but you can pick out the corn rows really easy because of the damage to the pumpkins the following year. This is a product that with long-term use, a farmer just notices that his crop some years isn't as vigorous as it used to be. And if you compare that field and have one adjacent to it that hasn't had the glyphosate use, you'll see the reason for that vigor. But if an agronomist comes out and looks at the field, he'll say, well, it was too much stubble on the field, or too cold a spring, or too wet a spring, never thinking that that residual glyphosate still has some activity, but it's tied up those essential minerals that are the activators and regulators for our physiological process. So that when Dr. Sheffer, veterinary pathologist in Minnesota, was trying to figure out why they were having so many miscarriages and abortions and malformed calves being born, it all boiled down to an extreme deficiency of manganese. He said, or he looked at it, all of his malformed calves and that were all extremely deficient, 100% of them. But when he analyzed the liver and that from healthy calves that had been born healthy, 63% of those were also deficient. Only 27% were really at an adequate manganese level. They just hadn't phenotypically shown the effects of that deficiency. He looked at the feed supply, and that's what you see is the maximum feed, the highest levels of those critical nutrients that he was finding in any of the feed was what 30 years ago we would have put in the deficiency category. He didn't have any of them that he found were at full sufficiency for either our consumption or for animal feed. As a consequence of those nutrients, nutrient tie-up, because of the relationship of mineral nutrition and resistance of the plant, we see 40 diseases now that, in serving on the Threat Pathogens Committee for the country, we classify those 40 diseases now as re-emerging diseases, having the capability to impact our production efficiency and quality. Shouldn't have eaten that bar. So that these are all increasing because glyphosate stimulates the virulence of these pathogens. And so for Roundup Ready soybeans, for instance, Bob Kremer at the University of Missouri reported that there were 500-fold increase in fusarium root rot when you applied glyphosate to the Roundup Ready soybeans that were engineered to tolerate the chemical that stimulated the disease and made the disease much more severe. In fact, we have several new diseases with the genetically engineered crops. One of those is sudden death syndrome. It's a disease that didn't exist before Roundup Ready soybeans. Can cost us $1 billion in lost crop a year. If you look at the relationship, the cause of that disease is fusarium glycines, soil-borne fungus. I was isolating it in 1957 in Michigan on my PhD degree, or 58, that was just common soil saprophyte. Helped in residue breakdown, but was never a pathogen on any of the crops at that time. Now it's a very serious pathogen, but XB Yang at Iowa State showed that if you have a seed treatment with manganese and magnesium, this disease won't develop. And you can see the damage from this. I have a slide here with the showing a half mile down the field where the telephone poles are. You see around each of the telephone poles some green soybeans. The rest of the field is all killed from the sudden death syndrome. The reason they're still green around the telephone poles isn't because of the electromagnetic force or anything there, but because it didn't get the soybeans, because the glyphosate because the farmer pulled back away from the pole. He didn't want to hang his boom up. And so these soybeans are still capturing the sun's energy, storing it as sugar, and with some nitrogen fixation, they're farming the proteins, and those plants are still working for you. But you can see that damage that is done when you stimulate the pathogen and tie up those critical nutrients. We have food and feed safety concerns with this chemical. Monsanto told EPA when they went in for registration that it only inhibits the shikimate pathway, doesn't do any other damage. Now we know that it actually inhibits 291 enzymes, which match up with the 10% of the essential amino acids as far as their function as cofactors. But we see the reduced nutrient density, and that's impact on our national health. We see increased levels of toxic products because we're spraying them systemic chemicals directly on the crop that then accumulate in the growth points and in the reproductive structures. Those are things that we eat. And then all of the other direct toxicity of the chemical as far as involved in fertility, the estrogenic, androgenic activity at 0.5 part per million or a part per million. And all of the 291 enzymes that are inhibited make it an awfully good herbicide, but also very toxic as far as a product for us to eat. Those damages were all known and all published and presented to EPA. It still went ahead and certified and cleared the product for mass distribution and indiscriminate application throughout the entire ecology. And some of the information that's come out as a result of the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma lawsuits show that even in Monsanto's own studies, they have the one study, Lanka and Hogan in 1981, showed that 23.8% of the glyphosate-exposed animals developed one of 12 or 15 lymphomas, 0 in the control animals. If they didn't have any exposure, and now as a consequence now, because of failure to warn people, they told us all that poof and it's gone when it's sprayed. Failure to warn them of the damage. In fact, people lost their jobs that tried to point out that it was a very toxic product. Chronically toxic, it's not acutely toxic. But you see their own studies showing the toxicity. We have the disaster situations like we had in Yakima, Washington, or Yakima County. It had 3 rivers that run through the three counties, Benton, Hamilton, and Yakima counties. In 2008, the Department of Natural Resources said we've got invasive weeds in these rivers, and so they started dumping glyphosate in them for weed control. EPA said it's safe up to 700 parts per billion, so they put it in. That was plenty high to kill the weeds. These 3 rivers provide the drinking water and the irrigation water for those 3 counties, and 2 years later had an 8,000% increase in anencephaly in the babies. Most of them were miscarried or aborted fetuses. If the baby lived, it only lived for 24 hours because the brains didn't develop.
I saw a recent study that showed that glyphosate basically creates oxidative stress, oxidative damage within the placenta, damaging the mitochondria, increasing the risk of miscarriage, just what you described.
Last week in Iowa, at a meeting 2 weeks ago in Iowa, I said we can't understand why our hospitals, several in the town there, are having 3 to 5 miscarriages a week. And said it's been going on now for some time, and they haven't identified a cause. But the cause is well known. If they want to do some simple analytical tests of the water, they've been in a drought situation. The reservoirs are low, so they're controlling the weeds all around them. You get all the spray in that water. Plus, Iowa has the highest glyphosate usage that the U.S. Geological Survey has reported. So they also have the highest cancer rate of any of the 48 states. So it all ties together. If you look at the epidemiological curve for a number of diseases, the one that I have here is for children diagnosed with celiac disease that required hospitalization in Alberta, Canada hospital. And you see that curve since the introduction of GMO canola, and then the increased exposure as the incidence of the disease, which tracks the incidence of the celiac disease. But it's that same curve that is in effect for all 32 of those diseases, from asthma to Alzheimer's. Well, Nathan, I apologize here.
You don't have to apologize.
I ate that bar and it's caught up with me.
That's okay.
All 32 of these diseases have essentially an identical epidemiological curve. The Pearson's correlation coefficient is 0.9 to 0.99. One is absolute causation. And I served on the Surgeon General's Global Epidemiology Committee. We had a figure when we saw that type of correlation at 0.57. We would convene a scientific panel to look at that and say, well, is this causation or is it correlation?
Right.
When you get 0.9, you don't have to look very far, and especially where you have the same epidemiological pattern that with incidents from CDC and the exposure from the USDA to glyphosate in corn and soybeans. And you see that identical curve that transfers and that data, if you look at that.
Wow.
The toxicity, again, is both from an antibiotic standpoint as well as chelation. You can see the toxicity to the antibiotic effect against all the beneficials that would suppress your salmonella or clostridia or E. coli or your pathogens there. And That's why we've had massive food recalls, the eggs for salmonella, poultry for salmonella, cantaloupe for listeria, and bird flu, because the animals are much more susceptible when they're on a glyphosate contaminated feed supply. We also see that carrying over into the environment as a whole. We see the eutrophication of our waterways and rivers and streams and that, as you see here with the blue-green algae. Well, the blue-green algae are resistant to glyphosate, but all of their competitors are also susceptible. So with a third of a pound of glyphosate going right through the filter strips into the lakes and streams, we have an ideal situation for eutrophication, because our natural controls have all been eliminated by this quote-unquote miracle compound called glyphosate that is toxic to the competitors and the natural control organisms. Botulism in dairy cattle now is one of the most common diseases. Our dairies in this country have an average loss of about 7%. When we lost a cow in our dairy, it was always from bloat, where it had gone through the fence into the pasture, into the alfalfa field in the early spring. But when we lost a cow, that was a major tragedy. Have a dairy in our area, a 6,800 cow dairy, squeezes them 3 times a day and loses 1 cow a day to chronic botulism. 365 cows, replacement heifers, is about a $900,000 cost. I asked him if he'd like some a biological cocktail that is available to spray 500 acres of his Roundup Ready alfalfa to eliminate the glyphosate. And he said, no, my dairy consultant said that that's normal and there's nothing he can do about it, so he's not going to worry. He just takes the loss. But what Dr. Monica Kruger at the University of Leipzig showed, and coming up with a solution for the chronic botulism epidemic in Europe, she showed that at 1/10 of a part per million glyphosate in the feed, it killed all the beneficial organisms, so that then those organisms couldn't control the Clostridium botulinum. Sudden infant death syndrome and chronic fatigue are also very prevalent in this country. Those are the human versions of chronic botulism in cattle. And you see that devastation. I was involved in, done consulting for a number of years in Central America. They're losing 1 sugarcane worker out of 4 dies from end-stage kidney failure because of glyphosate. And this, we wanted to eliminate glyphosate. It's used as a ripening agent. And so we developed a nutrient system to ripen the sugarcane without the glyphosate. And in that process of nutrient ripening, we also increased the processed sugar coming out by another 8%, which more than compensated for the nutrients. Plus, we didn't damage the following crop that comes up from the ratoon process, so that they also gained about 20% more production capacity there to get rid of the glyphosate. But the 25% lethality to the sugarcane workers could be eliminated then by getting rid of the glyphosate. Tasmanian on a world basis, and his Tasmanian's group in Sri Lanka showed that the same thing was happening in the rice harvest. Where they were hand harvesting, they would go out a week or so before harvest and spray the rice fields with glyphosate, and then be in there with the sickles harvesting the rice. Get exposure then to the glyphosate that was still residual in the foliage, and with their hard water, it would chelate with the minerals in their hard water that they were drinking and plug up the kidney, and again had very high losses, just like we did in Central America. Nicaragua and Panama alone, they lost 20,000 sugarcane workers in 1 year. So that very devastating. We lose 3 people in the U.S. to end-stage kidney failure or kidney failure in general for every 2 that we lose from breast cancer. Again, it's a very serious problem for us. We look at the situation with autism in the U.S. in 2007. It was 1 in 150 children diagnosed with autism or autism spectrum syndrome. 2 years later, it was 1 in 100. 2009. In 2013, it was 1 in 50. Right now, it's 1 in 31. And Stephanie Seneff has plotted that at the current rate, it'll be 1 in 2 will be autistic in 2032. You consider that with the fact that in 1970 it was 1 in 10,000, and what we've done to with our children on that. Again, looking at the epidemiological curve for autism, you see that same curve that we saw for celiac disease or Alzheimer's or inflammatory bowel disease or any of a number of cancers and the other diseases. Again, with autism, the correlation coefficient is 0.99 with glyphosate. And you see that tie also, that there are other things that can cause autism. Vaccine has a fairly comparable correlation coefficient, but you see that the combination of those two fits because of the aluminum in the vaccine. Also, there's glyphosate in the vaccine. Then there's glyphosate in the food and water that's in many of our situations. Glyphosate's a chelator that moves aluminum across the blood-brain barrier. So that you get that direct application then. Well, anyway, there are a lot of these situations where we don't talk much about the correlation or about the glyphosate impact because it's a commercial product that the companies are sensitive to and will do everything they can to stop the information getting out. So in the past, what we've done is we've recommended that our growers are seeing that their crops aren't as vigorous as they used to be, finding very high levels of glyphosate. we recommended that they put some gypsum in with the seed box so that those new plants have some potassium or calcium or cations to tie up that glyphosate that's there to chelate, so it's not an herbicide, but it's still tying up the minerals. But what we've done is try and detoxify it because we didn't know how to get it out of the soil once it was there. Well, all this did was kick the can down the road. So that at some later date, when they put out their higher rates of phosphorus to get optimum yields from a fertility standpoint, they desorbed the glyphosate, became an active herbicide for root absorption, and they killed the crop, doing everything right agronomically, not recognizing that elephant in the room that's this glyphosate, residual glyphosate. So it's kind of exciting to see how effective raw sauerkraut juice would be to control or to degrade residual glyphosate. Dr. Monica Kruger showed that if you added about a gallon of raw sauerkraut juice per ton of feed, fed it to the cows where they were having the chronic botulism problem, that the raw sauerkraut juice that contains the Lactobacillus plantarum as a fermenting organism for sauerkraut, that if you'd add that to the feed, that it has that CP lyase, carbon phosphate lyase, that breaks down the glyphosate all the way to water and phosphorus and nitrogen. So we were seeing enough of these serious problems where the soil was essentially sterile, that we needed to degrade the glyphosate to restore the soil, regenerate it, and put out 15 gallons per acre of raw sauerkraut juice. Just sprayed it on, had a harrow behind just to protect the organism a little bit from the sun. 6 months, we had 80% of that glyphosate that had been accumulating for years, completely degraded and out of the soil. Our corn yields the following year, 13 bushel per acre on a silt loam soil and 11 bushel per acre on a sandy loam soil. The crops looked like they'd just been given a shot of adrenaline and when we did the tissue testing and that, you saw all of those micronutrients that were then increased, but you can, again, this study we started out with 636 part per billion glyphosate, and 6 months we're down to 100 or down to 80 parts per billion.
Wow.
And the organism continues then in that process for some time to continue to degrade that glyphosate to recover and to regenerate the health, the living part of our soils. And been exciting to see this. Again, with just the raw sauerkraut juice. On the sandy loam soil, we had a 7 bushel yield increase in grain and 1.8 ton per acre more silage, with the combination of culture of lactobacillus and 7 other organisms along with the lactobacillus in the raw sauerkraut juice. We had an 11 bushel yield increase, grain increase, and 2.7 ton more silage produced. So just by getting rid of that residual glyphosate, bringing life back to the soil.
Increase the productivity.
You see tremendous return on investment.
Wow.
We're finally getting a a return on your investment in those conditions. Again, we showed the nutrient density in the corn. The cows liked the silage better from where we had gotten rid of the glyphosate, had a significant increase in milk production, and the nutrient density was brought back up to the same levels that we had 35 years ago. So tremendous improvement. Again, for glyphosate, you can't see it or taste it or smell it, but it can slowly kill you. It impacts everything in the environment, doesn't miss anything that we hold sacred and dear to us. I think that future historians may well look back and write about our time. Not about how many pounds of pesticides we did or did not apply, but about how willing we are to sacrifice our children, jeopardize future generations with this massive exposure to glyphosate that's based on false promises and flawed science, just to benefit the bottom line of a commercial enterprise. So that glyphosate is really the ultimate killing machine. And now that you're warned, please warn your neighbor.
Don, this is our first time to meet. You're on here to help us warn more people because we're taking care of cancer patients. And to heal patients with cancer, we have to prevent patients with cancer. But to do that, we got to heal the land. And you're giving us one of the key constituents to what's basically destroyed the land, to use your word, and precipitated disease. It's ripped life from the very aspect of that which gives life, the soil. I want to thank you for this presentation. I want to thank you. I want to honor you for your work. I want to honor you for your courage. I can't give you a Lifetime Achievement Award, but what I can tell you is I will spread your message. I will share your warning. You will get all the credit, as you should. Your work, your courage, but you have stood up and you have been courageous. And with that, more people can stand up, be courageous. And so I applaud you, and I hope to get to know you more because I like being around people of courage, and I like being around people of science. I especially like being around people that speak truth. Thank you for joining me on this episode, this podcast, and it's been an honor.
Well, thank you for letting me.
Yeah, I truly appreciate it.
When you get an old professor and a captive audience, he's going to abuse it. So appreciate the time.
No abuse, only wisdom, and something that we must take notice of. I thank you again.
It's serious.
I agree.
And then when you look at the other situation that we're up against, and that's the bill before Congress to grant immunity to the pesticide companies. All four of them are foreign companies that manufacture our pesticides. We don't have there are one or two that may manufacture one product. Excuse me. But none of them, we don't have any of the major pesticide manufacturers left in the country. They're telling us that they have to have freedom from lawsuits if we're going to continue to have pesticides. Well,
sounds like we need to quit having
let's
pesticides.
get rid of the pesticides. At least if you can't have them. But what they're asking us to do is to destroy Amendment 7 of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. My representative for Idaho is the one that slipped this section into the Interior Committee our anterior annual appropriations bill that would grant them same waiver of liability that the vaccine manufacturers have. They're asking us to eviscerate our federal and state Bill of Rights, our Constitution, with just a congressional bill. Now, we did that with the vaccines, and I don't know why someone hasn't taken that to the Supreme Court, because we changed the Constitutions only by amendment, not by a 1986 bill or a 2005 bill. If this bill passes, I think I can be fairly safe in guaranteeing that in return, they'll continue to poison our rivers and streams and waterways, sterilize our soils, contaminate our food, feed and environment with toxic chemicals, corrupt our government, mutilate our children with birth defects, and sell products with ingredients that are actually 1,000 times more toxic than the glyphosate, but the EPA only requires evaluation of the quote-unquote active ingredient. So that's 5 to 8% of the product. 98 to 95% of the product is never analyzed. That's your formulants and your adjuvants that make that product active. That, again, we know are 1,000 times more toxic than the glyphosate, and yet they're never evaluated. They'll continue to trash any opposition. I've been on as an expert witness for lawsuits that Monsanto has filed against growers for patent infringement, and they're merciless. They've had 1,100 lawsuits where they've essentially taken the farm in legal costs and for patent infringement. I made the comment to one of their attorneys after the farmer lost on a patent infringement case, and I told him, I said, at some time you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're going to want every one of those farmers to come and support you. They're not going to be there. In Idaho, bills for a waiver of liability has been entered in 4 different times. We killed it in committee this year. Didn't even get it out. Didn't want it out. But the Idaho, our Idaho poll, or poll of Idaho people, show that 90% were smart enough to know that you don't give away your constitutional rights to a company that has a monopoly on the rest of your life anyway, and that's seed production. And but it was our own congressman that introduced it, but 79 Republican congressmen signed on to say that they would approve that bill if it was introduced. So that they'll continue to knowingly lie to the public about safety, and they'll continue to poison and kill if they're given that opportunity. So they say, well, we'll let EPA justify registration as far as that responsibility to warn, because they do the analysis. Well, they don't do any analysis. And the EPA isn't capable by its own statements. They state they don't do any analysis, but they rely solely on statements of the companies that the products are safe. And they generally won't accept any independent evaluation for toxicity. They only look at the company. the head of the EPA, in many cases, is only a year away from being an employee of one of the chemical companies. They just have a revolving door. And you see Marianne Copley's letter to her superior. Marianne was a senior toxicologist at EPA, and she wrote a letter on her deathbed before she passed away to clear her conscience, and listed the 16 ways that glyphosate causes cancer, and asked Jess to quit changing the toxicologist's report to make the company's products look good and tolerable. And yet they would still ask for that requirement, so that we've got a corrupt system to deal with, but one that we can't live with. We've got to correct, got to change. I appreciate your willingness to share the word.
I have an obligation.
Oh.
We've been warned by somebody that has great wisdom, that can speak truth and experience through that warning. Now you've been warned. Share that warning. I'm Dr. Nathan Goodyear with the Prescribed by Dr. Nathan Goodyear podcast. We'll see you on the next podcast.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Prescribed Podcast. All references supporting this episode can be found on the prescribed.com website. That's pre-scribe.com. To get your next dose of medical innovation, make sure you subscribe to Prescribe. We'll see you for your next refill.